Hello, my inspired people. This is a special episode of Inspired Earth, and I hope that you guys enjoy. We're going to be doing a reaction to a recent episode of Weaponized, which is Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp, and they had Richard Dolan as a guest, and they were talking about disclosure, which is ironic because not long after that there was a disclosure, which we've talked about. And I just wanted to specify that this is not a derogatory attack or criticism or anything negative towards Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp, or Richard Dolan. All three of them are heroes of mine, and I love them, and I adore the work that they do, and I just wanted to say that. And this is just adding information to the conversation, some food for thought, so to speak. And yeah, we're gonna move on through here, and some of them I'm gonna put together because they're basically talking about the same thing, even if they're separated through time. And I'm gonna react to them all together. And I hope that you guys enjoyed this. This is gonna be a little bit different, and I'm sure it'll evolve with time. But I'm super excited and just happy to talk about this topic and react to some of my favorite people. Alrighty, everybody. Before we start, I just wanted to say that this episode that I'm doing a reaction of is free on YouTube, and it's with Jeremy Corbell's YouTube page, which you should go and check out. And this is all free, like I said. So let's get it going. And a lot of this is midway through to the later portion of it, because the beginning was kind of just an intro, and we're talking about some of the later concepts that they were reacting to those things that they said.
It's like a hall of mirrors, and what's true and what's not true. I suspect that we've got some very advanced technology that is dedicated solely for the ET phenomenon, that is withheld from normal geopolitical warfare, because it's too important. This would be why, we don't see any black triangles being used in America's theater of operations, because they're probably considered to be too important.
So that's definitely a good thought that Richard had there, and he's probably correct for the most part. I'm not sure that he's correct all of the time, or 100% with that, because some of the craft that we have, the military seems to have encountered, seems like it could possibly be U.S. government testing on their own troops, these secret space programs that they just talked about this week. And this was published January 9th. And what we just talked about in the last episode of Inspired Earth was dropped on January 23rd. So, as well, he's right. But I feel like he's right, and maybe in the slightest exceptions wrong, because also, if you remember with the article, it had said that they see us being attacked and they can't defend us. They don't have permission to defend us because it's so highly classified, and that kind of defeats the purpose of having a super secret technology if you are being attacked but can't use it because it's so classified. So he has a point there, and that's basically what the Pentagon, DoD, general military people had said in the last episode that I had read, was that it's too highly classified, and that might even be holding them back scientifically. But as far as black triangles being used, they are for sure not going to be used for combat, but are they used for information gathering to some degree? I could see that being more reasonable, and that could have possibly occurred in the past. And here we have clip from Richard Dolan talking about ancient pre-modern times, and we'll hear what he has to say about that.
They've got incredible capability. I will just add, we hear this a lot. They've been here forever. They've been here forever. Yeah and no. I mean, I actually got a different opinion on this. I look at the ancient UFO stories. I think I've read as many as that are available. And I'm not as impressed by a lot of that ancient evidence. I'm just going to say it. There's some early cases that are very interesting and intriguing. Yes. And so I would agree that we've probably been subject to a long-standing observation. I'm not going to deny that. But we have to ask, if they've been here a long time, who's the they? Have the Greys been here a long time? I don't see evidence of that. I see evidence that the Greys have been here since really the 20th century.
So he does state that in Australia there's one possible place that Greys have been depicted with ancient people, but it's kind of an outlier, he says. And with Greys, that is true. If you want to look through history for Greys, then it could be hard to find. It's not super obvious, blatantly in your face. However, there are other species that people have said that they have been encountering for a long time that I would classify as being here for a long time, like he said. And one of those would be the blue-skinned gods of Hinduism, that clearly they came here and taught humans, and that's literally what it says in the scripture, and that we'll talk about that more here in a little bit, but we'll continue on with Richard before we get into those topics. And this is a little bit more Richard on basically the same thing.
You know, religious warfare ripping Europe in half for several centuries in the 15th and 16th, 17th centuries. That factors into a lot of these sightings. You had the fact that people were constantly looking for portents and signs in the sky to interpret, typically in a spiritual or religious way.
Sea serpents.
Yeah, well, and how about this? Mermaids.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Sightings of mermaids. Some of them are pretty detailed. I'm thinking, made me uncomfortable. Some of these mermaid reports that I have read from like 200 years ago, a lot of them in Ireland and Scotland, I'm like, this guy is a really good bullshit artist, because I can't understand.
Or lonely. Very lonely.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's a bunch of lonely sailors out at sea, man. Come on.
But there's a few that are so detailed. I have to wonder, like, what's going on here? Most of them are not that detailed. But I guess my point is there's a lot of unreliable reporting from early periods that we just have to take into account. Having said that, there's some very interesting cases, not just from Europe, but also Japan and China. They recorded they have some of the best ones, the Chinese and Japanese, have, in my view, when I look at the ancient sightings, the ones that make me most persuaded that they're seeing something legit. I'm getting a little off track. As far as with USO cases, I haven't seen any that I thought were really persuasive prior to the 1800s. But a lot of them from the mid-19th century onward, quite a few. And when you get into the 20th century, it's like, good Lord, there's so many. I don't know how much time I love talking with you guys. So, as I said, I love throwing out theories. I have a theory that we are, as a species, moving into what I now call the fourth stage of humanity. And by that, I simply mean, in our long history, we had hundreds of thousands of years, millions really, as hunters and gatherers. 10,000 years ago, basically, we start developing agriculture and domesticating animals. That's phase 2. That's a great phase. That gives you cities. That gives you the Roman Empire and all this other cool stuff. And then phase 3, we discover science. A couple of hundred years ago, it creates a completely different form of human social organization, a completely different kind of cosmology and way of understanding the world, of We were all born into that. But I think we're moving into a fourth stage, which is kind of hyper science. It's, yeah, like we were talking digital control of everything. It's transhumanism. It's strong AI. Like, where is that going to lead? And all of these other things that are happening all at once that are clearly changing us.
Okay, so I love all three of these guys, like I already said, and he made a lot of really good points. I have some notes, so you might hear some paper crinkling and stuff, but it's just me. I'll try to keep it to a minimum. Imagine how much information has been lost from colonization throughout time. And I know that he mentioned the wars in Europe of interfighting during like the Crusades and even, well, I mean, before that, and just Europe's had a lot of interfighting, and I know that he mentioned that, and that definitely does have a big part to play in this. However, colonization, I think, has an even bigger role to play, possibly, because it has more area and more people affected and more cultures affected, more information affected. And while the information affected in Europe by the Dark Ages was really bad, and other people have gone through it, that, you know, the full scope of what's happened across the planet is yet to be known, as far as the regard to the Holocaust of the native people of this planet before Eurocentric colonizers came and did what they did to the world. So with that thought in mind of what he was just talking about, with the Spanish burning the Mayan books and unknowable amounts of other civilizations, you know, we just had found the civilization in Ecuador that they didn't even know about, and it was more advanced than all of the previous civilizations, or that came after them. All of the civilizations that came after that Ecuadorian one were less sophisticated and less advanced that we found. And basically beforehand, if anything wasn't Eurocentric and it didn't fit with the narrative of what Europe wanted to hear, then it was taken out and there's no context for it. It was just eliminated. So that's why there's this wealth of knowledge in Europe to some degree, whereas in South America or in other parts of the world, there's just absolutely nothing left. It's because everything was burnt. Imagine even the Library of Alexandria or the things that had come before that. And E.T. might have, with the extraterrestrials, which is the ET, may have gone through this sort of thing before, and they acknowledge the loss of knowledge through this colonial violence and the futility of this sort of behavior, because while you get material gain, you lose knowledge, both socially and personally. You know, you're losing yourself by taking apart other people, and you lose knowledge because they are the way that they are, and they have knowledge that you would not get otherwise because you're different. What we haven't mentioned yet also is Hinduism, with regard to underwater submerged objects, the USOs, that Richard Nolan's writing a new book on. I am super excited for that. That sounds incredible. Underwater stuff is always really, really nifty, and it's something that's been going on for a long time. People experiencing strange stuff while they're navigating the waters and the seas way longer than has been written about in our textbooks, that's for sure. But Hinduism specifically talks about underwater civilizations and underwater craft that are transmedium, that go from air, land, sea, space, and that they're extraterrestrial, and that they come down and teach humans whenever they need to be taught certain things, which I can elaborate on later. But it goes into really specific stuff in regard to different extraterrestrial factions, what they're doing, what their plan is, what they're going to do through time, their technology, how to access it, and even they name their ships like we do. Like we have USS Enterprise for like an aircraft carrier. They name their ships, like the ET had named their ships as well. So it's not just like a single name for different types of crafts, which ancient alien people talk about Vimanas, that has been in the TV shows for like ages, and everybody just thinks of the name Vimanas, but they don't understand that the Vimanas, while yes, they are a spacecraft, that's just a generic name for them. Each Vimana has its own name, which I think is like, if they're gonna make something up like that, I don't think that they would be that specific, or that it would be difficult. And Richard had covered a lot of things there, and I have mixed feelings about some of it. I think the slow rise of civilization type of thing that he was talking about is a little bit of a myth, kind of. In a way it is, and in a way it isn't. And whenever he said that we just invented science in the last couple hundred years, it is true. But once again, the rest of the world was ahead of Europe. I mean, Africa had invented sterilization before Europeans did. I'm pretty sure it was like during the Dark Ages, whenever they were like blocking out anybody from learning in Europe, the rest of the world was still advancing to some degree. And in fact, Europe went backwards. So the people that are very Eurocentric don't want to talk about that. And this is something that's just coming out in the literature and science and archaeology and all of the ologies out there. It's something I'm really passionate about, because I feel a connection to that, and I just feel like the truth needs to be known, and that we will be better humans for knowing our actual past and having connection to it, because it has to do with what is going on today and who we are today, and who we aren't today, who we are not today. But so there has been typically a little bit of a slow rise of civilization that does trend. That trend obviously does happen a lot of times, but there's cataclysms that happen. Take, for example, the solar flare that's always talked about with people in the media, again, entertainment and stuff, with let's talk about like a Carrington level event. Carrington event was in the late 1800s, a solar flare that came out and fried all the telegraph wires and like set stuff on fire. And they say that if it would happen today, that all of our computers and power and electricity would basically be fried. So the only people that would live through that would be basically people that are rural, and like people in the Amazon would not be affected. So think about that almost everybody in quote unquote industrialized world would not make it. They would perish from the solar flare, and tribal people would live. And most likely there would be some people that would flee the civilizations, and whenever, because things are going to get crazy if that were to happen. And running away would probably, from everybody else, would probably be a really good idea. And going to these tribes and stuff, or making your own out in the middle of wherever, you take little bits of knowledge of the previous world and come and teach them that. And perhaps that is how civilizations throughout time have this rise and fall that happen, because we've already learned how in Ecuador the older civilization was more sophisticated than the newer one, and that's happened in Egypt, that's happened in Turkey, that's happened in more places than I can even name right now. And these cataclysms can happen from more than just a solar flare. Solar flare is just one type of example that would affect our society today, that would bring us back basically to like the Stone Age or Bronze Age or Iron Age, arguably, if hardly anybody would even know how to make iron, if they had to. And it can happen from volcanoes and comets and meteors. It's not just a solar flare that can happen. And these are also cyclical type of things, that comets and the sun and meteors are all cyclical. And it's interesting that he said that that we were in the fourth stage, because that's what the Hindu belief is as well, that there are these stages called yugas, and that we're in the fourth yuga, which is the Kali Yuga. And if you're interested in that, I would look up Michael Cremo. He's really, really good. Also, dive into the Mahabharata and the Bhagavad Gita, and you can read those things. There's audiobooks. They're really fun. There's a lot of wisdom and teaching in it, along with like the Bible. You know, it's a very helpful, wise type of thing. And in regard to Hinduism, it says that Earth is 4.32 billion years old. The universe goes through many different cycles. I already talked about the yugas. I'm not going to go through more of them because it gets really complicated, and you can look it up yourself. It is extremely interesting. It's just we would take forever to go through it. The rest of the time would all be dedicated to that. But the interesting part about the Kali Yuga, about it being in the fourth era, and him saying that we're in the fourth era, is that the fourth era is the Kali Yuga, and people start losing their minds basically a little bit, and that they lose their virtues, and they become worse than they ever have been, really, and that Dharma will eventually restore the universe and the cosmos. And this is also where Buddhism comes from, is Hinduism, is that it stems off of that. And the people losing their virtues that is described in Hinduism, I'm gonna say is attributed to the rise in totalitarianism that they talk about, and he kind of hinted at, and that this has happened on other planets before, that good and evil is not unique to our planet. Totalitarianism is definitely a strategy for going out into space and for being in your own world, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best, or that it doesn't have its downsides, because you have no freedom with totalitarianism. You have no individual freedom hardly at all, and it can hold you back in a number of ways. I mean, just look at the example of the secret defense or secret space force, that they were not making as much progress. They couldn't do anything, and they couldn't make any progress because it was so secret. I feel like it's the same type of thing. There are good and evil types of ETs, or if you want to use evil, good and bad types of ET out there. And that's directly related to totalitarianism that we're experiencing, and that our government is self-described as the military industrial complex. So naturally, they're more likely to cooperate with other militarized types of species. And also, the bad ET are also probably deceitful. So they're working humans against other humans, other countries against countries, and factions within what even their own country, fighting one another inside of the country. And even in our government, I mean, that's what we're watching right now, is that there are other factions that some want the disclosure and some don't want the disclosure. And obviously the ones that want the disclosure are not part of the same group, so to speak. They're not part of the cult, if you want to say that they're not informed. They're not participating in the same activities as the other people. They're not living the same lives. They're not they don't have access to the same types of information. And we see that transpiring right now in front of us. With for the past 7 years, we've been watching that happen. We see that the military and elected representatives, some want to help us and some don't want to help us. And that's an issue. You know, the ones that want to help us are probably scared out of their wits a little bit. And they're really brave for pressing on. And all the people talking about this are really brave. The bad ET are probably a galactic threat, maybe even a temporal or a time threat. They benefit from the people of the Earth, and excluding like the people that are in the group or in the cult or in the corporation or faction, Illuminati, whatever you want to call it, that the ET benefit from the Earth staying ignorant and sick and violent and with scarcity and afraid. The good ET therefore go with grassroots types of disclosure and contact methods. They go with a bottom up type of method by going to the common man and the scientists, the people at the bottom, and working their way up. And there are people at the top that get contacted, I'm sure. But they're the people that will listen. They know who will listen and who will not listen. The bad ET strategy is mainly a top-down type of strategy, that they will go after our elites and some of our elected officials. I feel like mainly the elected officials are not informed hardly at all, because they're elected. They come in and out of power. They're bought, or not bought, but they are bought. I was going to say bought by the public, but they're not bought by the public. They're bought by corporations. But they have the potential of being voted in by the public, is what I was trying to say. And that's something that they try to limit at all costs. And the grassroots bottom-up contact method is the reason that regular people have these personal one-on-one ET experiences that I'm going to play a clip of here in just a second that he talks about. That's the grassroots bottom-up contact method, is these experiences people have that are very personalized, like it's a performance or it's a structured show. They knew where you were going to be. They knew how to get you there. They knew when you were going to go. I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, if people that have had these experiences, a lot of them will know these sorts of things that I'm talking about. And it's really just unexplainable, and it's very personal. And it changes you. It really changes you. And that's for the good ET, you know. The good ET want us to get our stuff together. They want us to get us together internally, ourselves, as individuals, but also as a society. And the technology is imperative. It's imperative that we spread as much technology and disseminate it as fast as possible, as well as the information about the truth of life off the planet, and that there's other things going on that we don't understand. And it's going to transcend our whole existence. This is actually the entire reason that I started the podcast, is because we have solutions, we just don't have permission to use them. And I'm an advocate for getting technology and information to inspire and inform the public. That's the whole point of all of this. And I'm sure that that's the reason that you guys are doing this also, is because a whole different world is possible, and it all comes together. It's not like you can have one without the other. This is all interlinked really heavily, and how we take care of ourselves and the planet, and all of that really influences the situation. And good ET value free will, hence why we have to acknowledge our own situation and change ourselves, as well as ask for help. This becomes a snowball that changes everything. It means an end to oil wars, banking debt traps for entire nations. They want us to be healthy and get health care. The ET do. The good ET. But this is going to get real here. Have you ever tried to help somebody who doesn't want help? Whether it be with math homework, or cleaning their room, or cooking, or somebody that's trying to stop using substances or bad coping mechanisms. If they don't want to help themselves or change or acknowledge the situation that they're in and the things that they're doing, then you can't make somebody else love themselves, and you can't fix somebody else. You can't make somebody else appreciate themselves. And that's the key to all of this, that the ET can't do that. That's up to us. And whenever we start doing those things, not only will we help ourselves, and in doing that, we free ourselves from a lot of what's going on, but we will get help by doing those things. We just have to actually lean into the people that we want to be and the species that we want to be. Because with Hinduism, this goes through time, and a lot of other religions and faiths, and not just Hinduism. The reason I'm focusing on Hinduism is because it has so much specificity about ET and technology, and I will happily do some more shows on that in the future. I'm excited about that. And when we have giant incursions that are light shows and no one gets hurt, that's a form of disclosure right there. If you guys haven't looked at it, Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp have released video of multiple videos and photos of giant crafts, triangle in nature, as well as other that have hovered over massive military bases, and they are there for a long time. One of them was in the Palms the Marine base. 29 Palms. I couldn't think of it there for a second. I'm pretty sure that was it. If not, it's close enough. But you should look it up. Look up weaponized UAP photos, and I'm sure you'll be able to find it. And then there was the Pacific one with the night vision goggles that were like being filmed on the deck of the ship, and you can see all the flashing strobe lights, and the Pentagon said that it was real. And allegedly it could have been a pyramid, not just a triangle, which is really interesting that it was a pyramid. But I gotta slow down here a little bit. I'm getting excited. But those incursions, those, as the military calls them, those are incursions into their domain, is a light show. It's a disclosure, and they're frustrated that their people are getting exposed to this and that they can't control it. Also, some of this is also some of the government stuff that I was talking about. I have had people that have told me personally that have worked in these sorts of positions. Well, I don't even want to say too much, but I'll just say that I have had people that were in the military that have told me that there was possibly exotic craft used for observation type activities in combat, and that we do test crafts on our own soldiers for psychological evaluation. We evaluate how they react, what they think, what they do, and that's definitely a thing that's going on. But I don't think that's everything. That's cannot be the explanation for everything whatsoever. The bad ET, however, don't want freedom, but good ET do. So that means that we have to help ourselves out to get out of this. And that it could go through time. So yeah, kind of already mentioned that one. To circle back a little bit about the unidentified submerged objects that he was talking about, and that nobody has any good accounts of it other than Europe in the 18th century and stuff like that. Well, once again, we have demolished, and by we I say the European type of entities have removed the knowledge of the previous people of the earth, of all these massive, sophisticated civilizations. And it wasn't all a gentle ascension upwards of sophistication of the human civilization. It had ups and downs, probably pretty significant. And there's been a lot of knowledge that has been lost, even without conquistadors. But the conquistadors that did come over wrote in their logs and came back and said that the native people of South America were extremely good seafaring people, and that they had massive rafts similar to the Polynesian rafts. And you don't think that they're rafting out there, and that the rafts were unsinkable, they said, and that they were huge and massive and multi-storied, and that they could carry 50 tons or something like that is what they had said. And I mean, that's just what one person said. And they had multiple sightings. So you don't think that they saw stuff and that they just got wiped out by disease and all of this stuff? And I'm not like trying to put a huge blame game. I'm just pointing out the truth of the matter, and that we do need to look at that happened, and that this knowledge was lost, and to not have it happen again. You don't want an atrocity like this to happen again, and you have to be honest with it and put it forthright to make sure other atrocities don't occur like it in the future. When you start trying to hide atrocities, that means that you're going to try to do it again. That's the easiest telltale sign that you're going to have trouble in the future is if they try to cover it up. And they've tried to cover it up. So I think that we should be cautious in the future. Okay, and here we have a little bit more from Sir Nolan.
You think of most UFO sightings, they're fleeting. You saw it by luck. How many cases have I read where someone will say, it was 2 a.m, I couldn't sleep, I went out for a smoke and I looked up and oh my God, there was a black triangle, I almost missed it. And it was hovering 300 feet over my neighbor's house. Like, what's up with that? So that very easily could have been missed. And then it was gone, you know. So how many are there that we don't see? It's unanswerable. But I just reason that if there's, and I think 50,000 is a minimum of good sightings, what's the factor of sightings that are not seen at all?
Yeah.
So he guesstimated there that there are 50,000 good sightings of UFO, UAP activity every single year. And I'm pretty sure that was in the United States. Maybe, I'm not even sure that was globally. I think that might have just been in the United States. But even if it was globally, it's, regardless, that's a huge number of people. And it goes back to the grassroots thing that I was talking about, the bottom-up type of disclosure, that people have these personal experiences where he was saying, I couldn't sleep. The person was experiencing physical sensation or emotional sensation or some sort of thought train that led them to the point and time that they had this experience. If they would have been sound asleep and been able to sleep, then they would have never have gone outside to smoke a cigarette and see this crazy thing that was waiting for them. Now, are they always not sleeping good at night? You know, like this is like all very circumstantial or whatever, but it sounded to me by like the way that they were describing the story that it would have been abnormal for them to have been awake at night, and that was like why they mentioned I couldn't sleep that night. And I don't know, it's just a theory. I mean, it's one of those things that it could have been either or, but a lot of people have really, really personal, tailored experiences, and I would consider that to be the type of example that I'm talking about, actually, that you are laying in bed and you can't sleep and you're feeling restless or something and you just feel the need to take a walk and go outside at that moment, and you do, and you see something. It was like it was calling you and it led you there, and you had that experience and you were changed from it. And one could say that some of them are serendipity and that they weren't like calling you, you know. Some people just happen to see it, but other people, you know, there's even been, whether or not you believe this, again, let's just say hypothetically that they did experience it. There's people that are in New York that say that they can see things that other people can't, that are right there, and that they're having experiences that other people can't. So it kind of fits in line with that. And I do think that mental illness is definitely a real thing, but I don't know that all of this is necessarily mental illness. And how they play one amongst each other, that is also really complicated, I'm sure. But to say that just because you see something and say that you're crazy for it is not gonna get us anywhere. You have to analyze the whole situation and like their life and stuff like that. And we just need investigation. We need serious investigation. But this comes down with the bottom up type of thing that he's talking about, the personal tailored experiences. So I wanted to note that falls in line with what I was just mentioning. And we will move on here to Mr. Jeremy Corbell.
Stuff. We have heard through a lot of people that with the UFO thing that we're considered containers. And this is like killed me. What does this mean? Container of what? Have you heard this before, that in the UFO lore that we're containers? What do you make of that? Containers of what? What does that mean?
Well, I don't.
So I'm pretty sure John Lear was the one that had told that to Bob Lazar. I'm pretty sure he had mentioned that on a recording at one time, and even Bob Lazar, I don't think, claims responsibility for that. But I don't think that it could all be the soul thing. I mean, the soul thing is interesting. I think that that's something that Judeo-Christian mindset of the defense industry would normally jump to, and that's typically who is analyzing this sort of thing. But I don't necessarily know that that's always the answer to it. And I think that Jeremy's idea that we are a container of information, of thoughts, I think he says it further down here. I'm trying to find it. But I think that that's more of a concept, and that I think that DNA and stem cells are also a component of it, and that the DNA might be a part of the soul. I mean, we really don't understand any of that stuff right now, but I'm not saying that it can't be linked, and it sounds science fiction, but I think that it's possible that the DNA could be linked with the soul, and that, I mean, who knows? I mean, but I do think that they're coming here for DNA, and that we're the containers of DNA and stem cells, and also the thoughts that they were saying. So as far as the whole soul thing, it's possible, but I think that that's just the analysis, because that did come from John Lear, and he was in the intelligence circles, and this came from that paper, this paper, whatever. And again, who knows the authenticity of it, because John Lear, as they've said, had some pretty out there concepts, and not all these papers have been authenticated, and some of it might be half truths. So I'm thinking that that the whole soul angle is more from being projected from the defense industry, which is kind of interesting that you wouldn't even think that they would take that, but that's just their background, I guess, with the Bible, that they would think about souls with the whole killing thing. All right, so then we have Jeremy Corbell again and George Knapp.
Questions. The second one is there an adult in the room? George and I have kind of talked about this. We've dealt with a lot of military and intelligence people and agencies, and just try to figure out, when we're seeing people come forward behind the scenes rather than publicly, like, is there truly an adult in the room when it comes to the UFO problem and our government and our world governments? Do you believe that there are people that are truly have a grasp and are kind of handling this, whether they're putting out publicly or not?
So I'm just going to take a stab at that a tiny bit and say that obviously, okay, this is what we know for sure, and I'll lay that out, that there are factions within our government and military and possibly corporations that do want disclosure and want to tell us the truth, and that there are factions that are vehemently against that. And I think that the ones that are against it have, unfortunately, a lot more information than the guys on our side, because the guys on our side are fighting for information, so it's obvious that that they're lacking of it, to at least to some regard. We've snooped out a lot of stuff, but I think that even the good guys on the inside that might know more than us are limited in capacity and what they can do. So as far as what you would call an adult in the room, I think it would depend on what you would define as that. I'm not even sure what that means. Maybe that's a term that's older than me, but what it makes me think of by an adult in the room is somebody that's fully cognizant of the situation and they can make decisions that are informed, that are responsible. And I don't think that if that is your criteria, that's a big criteria, and I don't think that necessarily anybody fits that to the T, except for maybe the good ET that are trying to not step on our free will and also not cause a war, and they probably have to go about this really gently because the bad are in control here. So I mean, swooping in and changing things, I don't think that they believe in foreign intervention. I don't think that the good ET believe in foreign intervention. So the problem is within, and I think that the adults in the room, for the most part, are some of the civilians that have the most stable head. And again, what are you defining as the adult in the room? Because if you're talking about somebody who has the most technology and information on the subject, might not be the same group that has the most rational and logical thought and analysis of it. Because once again, even I just mentioned that the Defense Department and stuff takes like a Judeo-Christian mindset. They're training their AI killbots right now to like study the Bible. So I think that that's their take on it. And yeah, we'll move on.
It's happened before too, and that's gone away. So I'd like to be optimistic, but I've seen this stuff change before. And then, you know, as you write about AD after disclosure, you know, imagining the scenarios, it depends on what it is. If the truth is they're here harvesting our souls, people would freak the hell out. Are we food? Are we a resource of some kind? Did they genetically engineer us? Did they create our religions? There's a lot of people who, if that is what the truth is, are going to have a hell of a time with it. And maybe that's a reason why we'd never get disclosure. I wondered, Richard, if you had to write AD again, how might you tweak it?
Well, I want to mention one thing first, and then I would like to answer your question. This whole thing about this can go away, I think is absolutely true. Like, it seems to me, like, think about something like the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. That was 60 years ago. And you think about it, almost every person in the world knows that that president was killed in a conspiracy, probably by the CIA. Let's just get real. And yet, despite that, there is no official acknowledgement of that as such. And if you were they didn't just kill Kennedy, by the way, they killed all the people connected to that. There was a whole series of murders that took place in the aftermath of that, and they got away with it. And we kind of know that happened, but there is no repercussions. And as far as our official truth is concerned, you have talking heads out there saying, well, yeah, there may have been a conspiracy, but we just don't know. And you know what? The people who did that deed, they're quite happy. They don't care. They don't care that we know. All they care about is that there's no culpability to them. They're fine. And it's the same with UAP. It's the same. So
So yeah, they said a lot right there, and I just got to say that George, earlier you had asked why, well, if you're listening, George, why they don't land on the White House lawn. And I believe, like I had said earlier, that it's because we have free will and freedom, and they don't believe in hostile takeover or foreign intervention, and that we have to be the ones to change ourselves and ask for help, and begin the help. We can't just ask it. We gotta like do the work. But Richard, it was a great part about JFK that you said, and all great points. with the secrecy that people have with this technology, that want to avoid all the culpability of everything that they've done and never let anything see the public. That's why the good ET go to the grassroots type of disclosure method. Because the people at the top, like you said, are complicit and culpable to all of these atrocities throughout time and holding back all of this stuff that we're funding. And see where we're at here.
Before. And then, as you write about AD after disclosure, imagining the scenarios, it depends on what it is. If the truth is they're here harvesting our souls, people would freak the hell out. Are we food? Are we a resource of some kind? Did they genetically engineer us? Did they create our religions? There's a lot of people who, if that is what the truth is, are going to have a hell of a time with it. And maybe that's a reason why we never get disclosure. I wondered, Richard, if you had to write AD again, how might you tweak it?
George had mentioned there that there could be a lot of different scenarios with the ET phenomenon, and that's very true. And some of it might not all be very pleasant. So that is definitely an obstacle to a full disclosure to the truth. And I'm not sure how many people could deal with that. I think that they could deal with the bad if they got told with the good. Like, you can't just tell people that people are being abducted willy-nilly and there's nothing we can do about it, and then not add on the fact that, hey, yeah, there's also some of the abductions that are good and species that are possibly defending us and preventing abduction. And who knows how far the cat and mouse game of defense and attack goes regarding that sort of thing. So that's probably a big obstacle. But I kind of take a angle that's similar to Hinduism, that these concepts are cosmic concepts and that they go throughout time and space, and that there's been different cycles of civilizations that have struggled with these exact same concepts and philosophies and situations as us, and they don't all end up in the same situation. They don't all have the same fate. Some of them may make good decisions and then end in a natural disaster somehow, hypothetically, or they make bad decisions and they destroy themselves. But I think that ET learned from all of that, and that on the whole, that ET will learn that war is futile and that working together is better. Like the meme and the Planet of the Apes concept of apes strong together, that primates, working together are stronger, smarter, and that sort of thing. And I think that it's true. It's obviously true. And that's actually precisely what Richard had responded with, was that if that is the reality of things, then we need to know about it so that we can address it, because the reality is extremely important. There's basically nothing more important than reality, right? As far as like dealing with this issue. So we have to tell people, regardless of how bad it is, because that's how we evolve and that's how we survive. We can't just tuck our tails and hide from it. That won't do us any good. That's called being delusional. This part is epic with Jeremy Corbell wrapping it up.
I hear what you guys are saying, but the establishment has tried, to control the emerging UAP narrative. They're having trouble with it. This truly, in my perspective, is a UFO revolution. I have seen this because of the threats and intimidation from recent revelations that both George and I have seen, as well as other people that we know. So I know that there may be an adult in the room, but our democratic ability to instantaneously transmit information specifically through leaks and that kind of thing, people are frustrated and coming forward. We might not get everything all away, right away, but I am optimistic, and I do heed your guys' warning. I do heed it that this can go the other direction. But I think if we keep pushing and we keep focused on this of getting more information and breaking through this sound barrier, I think we're closer than ever in our historic record. So my question to both of you is, is consensus reality at this point? Are we kind of caught up, or are we catching up in popular culture to the UFO reality? And
so I just want to start talking from there that he basically just kind of described everything that I was talking about, but in a lot shorter of a sentence. And so it is a grassroots movement, just as he's describing. And if you look back through time, you can actually see that this has been going on for further than a lot of people would actually think. And I would love to be able to speak with any of you three guys. You guys are like my heroes, and I would absolutely love it to be able to speak with you. And as far as all the listeners, I also want to hear your opinion. If you want to email me or drop a comment or anything like that, let me know your opinion on all of this stuff. And my email is inspiredearthpodcast@gmail.com, which is just the regular spelling. Otherwise, you can link up with me on Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, all of the normal sorts of places. Also, the podcast is going to be posted on all the different podcast directories, so wherever you want to look, you'll be able to find it. And thanks for everybody listening in. This was really interesting, and it was a lot of work. It was my first time, doing a reaction video, and I had a lot to say and had to think about how I was going to say it. And I'm looking forward to the future of how we're going to move on. I have different sorts of projects planned, so this was like the first time that I've gone off of the regular format a little bit, so I'd like to hear what other people have to say about that. And I have some other types of things that I'm going to do that's like an expose type of thing, and so just stay tuned. And I hope that you guys like the art that I did also. Check that out. All right, be safe everybody, until next time.